Hey guys, and welcome to our first ever episode of Frightening Fiction. Today we're shaking things up and doing the intro first so we don't have to take away from this awesome story. Please note that I have expressed consent from tsarslavyan from Reddit to share the story which was posted in Or No Sleep. Without further ado, this is With a Strong Hand and an Outstretched Arm. My grandfather came to live with us when I was 7 years old. Up until then, he had been living in the same home he had since the war ended. His wife had passed away a couple years before, compounded with the fact that he wasn't getting any younger, convinced my parents that he had to come live with us. After nearly a year of dealing with immigration lawyers and bureaucratic red tape, my grandfather had gotten the approval to immigrate and come live with us. I remember going with my parents to pick him up from the airport the night that he arrived. He came out of the arrivals hall and I immediately noticed he looked just like my father, just with a little bit less hair. And the hair that did remain was silver, and he walked with an ornate wooden cane. He did not smile, nor did he look like he had an unpleasant disposition. He just had the appearance and air to him that life had thrown a lot his way. I had never met him before, and add to the fact that I was just naturally a shy kid, as well as me not being able to speak our mother tongue so well, I didn't really talk to him at all in the first week or so. However, the longer he stayed with us, the more comfortable I became around him. The language barrier still prevented us from having any meaningful conversations, but I was able to get that he was a good man. Just a little bit rough around the edges. Not long after Grandpa moved in with us, my parents decided that it was time for us to move. The apartment that we were staying in was far too small for us all, and they'd managed to scrape up enough savings over the last several years to put a down payment on an actual house. It still wasn't that much, so my parents initially only looked at the relatively small houses or in areas with poor schools or high crime rates. Then they hit the jackpot. A nicely sized house in a very good school district and neighbourhood, and at a far, far lower price than all the surrounding houses. My parents jumped on the opportunity immediately, and before I knew it, we were packing up all our things and moving into this nice new house. The day we drove up to the house, my grandpa held my hand and had his cane in the other hand, and we walked in through the front door together. After a few steps into the house, though, Grandpa became visibly upset. He was looking around and up and down the staircase at something I couldn't see or understand. When my father walked in with a moving box a minute later after we'd come in, Grandpa let go of my hand and started screaming at my father. I was so scared, seeing this man who, for the little bit that I'd known him, had been so calm, all of a sudden screaming the loudest voice I've ever heard to my dad. From the look on his face, my father was shocked too, and started screaming back, albeit not as loud as Grandpa. They were yelling in their native tongue, but I knew a couple words here and there, especially one that my grandfather kept using. Smiat. Death. This sufficiently scared me enough that I ran out of the house to my mother as the two of them continued to shout at one another. At some point they did stop yelling at each other, but the next few days at the house were tense as we unpacked. And any time that my dad and Grandpa would talk to each other, it would always be in the same volume that it was the day we moved in. About a week after we started living in the house, my dad returned home from work a bit later than usual, holding a cane that appeared to be made of iron. He handed it to my grandpa, who was sitting at the table with me. "Happy?" Dad asked. My grandfather nodded. Since then, the two of them never yelled like they had again. Grandpa would never be seen without his iron cane, and gifted me his ornate wooden one, which I used as a pretend sword when playing out in the neighbourhood with my friends. In addition to always walking around with an iron cane, Grandpa developed a habit of muttering while walking around the house. As I grew older, my knowledge of my parents' native tongue grew. I learned that they were Bible verses. A lot of them were your typical Psalms, but his favourite one to say as he walked around the house would be a verse from Exodus. in which God of the Israelites smote the Egyptians with the famous 10 plagues, with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. My mother became worried that this elderly man, who had for most of his life up until moving to this country been an outspoken communist, was suddenly becoming deeply religious. She was convinced that this might have been the early warning signs of dementia. A trip to the doctor after she sufficiently nagged my father proved her wrong. According to the doctor, he was as sharp as people decades younger than him. After they had come back from the doctor, Grandpa had asked me if I'd gone into his room and rearranged his things on his desk and nightstand. In particular, his antique knife collection that he had brought with him from the old country. When I told him no, for the first time, I saw a gleam of worry flash across his face. It lasted only for a second, though, and he just mumbled a quip about the doctor not knowing what the hell he was talking about and shut the door. After that day, Grandpa didn't leave the house, aside from short walks around the neighborhood. Since the doctor gave him a clean bill of mental health, as well as the fact that Grandpa wasn't really harming anyone by walking around and reciting Bible verses, Mom decided to just let it go. She would ask him every now and then why he did that, but Grandpa would just put up a hand and say that it was his problem to deal with. Fast forward to my early teen years. I was now much more proficient with my ancestral tongue, and had been able to steadily grow my relationship with my grandpa past just a couple words and polite gestures. We were able to talk about how I was doing at school, about my hockey practice, and he was able to tell me about his life, particularly during the war. About how he lost his entire family and village during the war, and how he was constantly surrounded by evil. I really began to truly appreciate just how much this man had been through, and even just how much our family meant to him, even though you could never guess it behind his icy Eastern European demeanour. One summer day we were all having lunch on our back deck, just me, my parents, and Grandpa. Everything was going normally, but then Grandpa stopped talking mid-sentence. We all sat there waiting for him to continue, but he didn't. Then, his eyes became wide and bulged out of his head, and he fell out of his chair. Everything that happened next was a blur. I apparently did grab the phone and called an ambulance, even though I have no memory of doing so. Next thing I knew, the paramedics were strapping him into a stretcher to load him onto the ambulance, and in the rush of the moment, my parents decided that they would go with him to the hospital while I would stay home. I remember making eye contact with Grandpa as they loaded him into the ambulance. The last thing I heard before they shut the doors was him yelling that he had to stay. After the shock of the moment was over, I began to clean up the leftovers. After I had everything all sealed up or wrapped up in aluminium foil, I opened the fridge door and was surprised to see that nearly everything in there had gone rotten. These were fruits, packed vegetables, and meat that had just been bought the day before. All rotten. At the time I thought nothing of it, and simply threw everything away before it would have a chance to stink up our refrigerator. I went to go take a shower to calm myself down. No matter how high I would turn up the knob though, the water would not heat up. It stayed ice cold. I powered through it, still shaken from what had happened earlier. As I was washing the shampoo out of my hair, with my eyes closed, I heard the door in the bathroom repeatedly open and close, and the window began to do the same. Shaken and scared out of my mind, I didn't bother finishing to wash, as I threw a towel around myself. As my vision cleared after getting out the shower water and the shampoo out of my eyes, it became clear to my horror that the door and window seemed to be opening and closing by themselves. Worse still, I could hear other doors and windows being opened throughout the house. I bolted past the possessed bathroom door and began making my way down the stairs, all in my towel. I heard the bathroom mirror shatter into countless pieces behind me as I ran. After reaching the bottom of the stairs and making a bolt for the front door, I slipped and fell, the result of my not trying my feet before running. Honestly, I'm still surprised that I didn't just fall down the stairs on my way down. Badly hurt, I started to get up. That's when I saw it. It was an ugly, obscene, and inhuman creature. I can't even begin to put into words what it looked like. To this day, I still try to push the image out of my mind. The smell that came off of it was revolting. like rotten meat left out in the sun. I could make out that in its hand it was holding a knife that I had seen countless times. The same knife that was in my grandpa's collection. I got up, but with my sprained ankle I could only hobble so fast, and I could hear this creature gaining ground on me. I tripped again right before I reached the door, and when I reached for the knob right above me, it would not budge no matter how hard I tried. The sound of every other door and window in the house opening and closing, combined with the footsteps of this cruel beast, overwhelmed me. It's funny, you always hear about fight or flight. At that moment, though, I chose neither. I just laid there, naked as my towel had fallen off earlier, resigned to my fate. Yet, amidst the cacophony of noise, there was one that stood out to me as familiar. An iron cane hitting the floor accompanied by footsteps. Suddenly, all other noises stopped. I gained the courage to open my eyes and look up. The creature, although not having eyes, appeared to be looking down the hall. The tapping of iron on the floor got worse, and then, around the corner, appeared Grandpa. He locked eyes with me, and upon seeing what the creature held in its only hand, walked in our direction, not with the vigour of an aging man, but that of a soldier. As he approached us, he raised the cane, and with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, gave the creature a stroke in one of its two heads with the iron cane. In addition to the skin of the beast sizzling when the iron touched it, it also gave out a shriek of its own with its remaining head. It raised its arm, ready to stab Grandpa with the knife, but with almost inhuman speed, Grandpa smacked its arm with the cane, costing it its only appendage aside from its legs. With two final jabs of the cane in the second head and torso of the nightmare, it was gone, with only a puff of smoke lingering for a few seconds longer. I slowly got up to put the towel back around myself and ask Grandpa what the hell had happened, but he wasn't there. The phone rang at that moment, causing me to jump. The caller ID informed me that it was my mom's cell phone calling. I picked it up. Mom, where are you guys? We're at the hospital, sweetie. We need... At the hospital? I asked, confused. Didn't you just drive Grandpa back? How else could he have... Honey, Grandpa passed away a few minutes ago. I would later learn that even when he passed away, he was still clutching that iron cane of his. And when they looked inside his jacket, there was a photo of me and him together, the day that I'd met him years ago at the airport. And there we have it. I really enjoyed reading you guys this story. Special thanks to Reddit user tsarslavyan for letting me use their story. Come back again next week for a creepy supernatural story that may or may not be of extraterrestrial persuasion. Stay freaky, stay informed. It may save your life.